You know, when you hear the word accountant, your mind probably jumps to taxes, boring spreadsheets, maybe even a nap. But what if I told you that behind all those numbers, there's a world of investigation, of mystery, and some really high-stakes detective work? Today, we're going to dive into this world where accountants are the detectives and the financial statements, well, those are the crime scenes.
This quote just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? So many people get these two things mixed up. When something feels off in a company's finances, say a business partner thinks they're being cheated or an investor smells fraud, the first thing they say is, "We need an audit." But an audit? That's really just a routine checkup. A forensic investigation, well, that's when you call in the detectives.
Right, that's the big question here. How does a person who deals with ledgers and balances suddenly transform into a financial sleuth, someone who's hunting down hidden assets and untangling these really complex webs of fraud? That is exactly what we are going to unpack.
So to really get your head around the whole accountant as detective idea, it actually helps to think about accounting as a story. And believe it or not, there's a whole genre of fiction that's built around this exact concept.
Yeah. It turns out there are really two kinds of accounting novels. On one hand, you've got your thrillers that use accounting as a cool backdrop for pure entertainment, kind of like a John Grisham novel, but with spreadsheets. But on the other hand, you have these mystery novels that are actually written specifically to teach you accounting. The plot itself becomes the lesson. Which just goes to show you that a good story is one of the best ways to solve a puzzle.
And this quote just nails it. This is from a review of a mystery novel called Risk, and it points out how the supposedly boring job of an auditor is actually perfect training for an investigator. I mean, think about it. Auditors have these incredibly analytical minds, they're always traveling, and their whole job is to dig into tiny details and find discrepancies that almost everyone else would miss. Those are the exact skills that make a great detective.
Okay, so if our accountant is a detective, what are their clues? Where do they look for evidence? Well, it's all in the company's financial statements. To most of us, they just look like pages full of numbers. But to an investigator, they are absolutely packed with clues.
First up, you've got the balance sheet. The best way to think about this is like a single photograph of the crime scene, frozen at a specific moment in time. Now, a regular auditor, they just look to see if the picture's in focus. But a forensic detective, they're looking for things that just don't belong, like assets that seem to appear out of nowhere, or debts that mysteriously vanish. This is always the starting point for finding what's out of place.
Next up, the income statement. So if the balance sheet was a photo, this is more like the security camera footage. It shows you all the action over a specific period. Our detective is poring over this, and they're looking for suspicious plot points. You know, like a giant surge in revenue from a customer that doesn't seem to exist, or maybe huge payments going out to some mysterious new supplier. This is where the story of the crime really starts to unfold.
And finally, we get to the classic detective move, you follow the money. See, profit on paper, that can be faked. But cash, actual physical cash, is a lot harder to hide. This statement is basically the detective's lie detector test. It tells you if the company's story is true by tracking where the cash actually came from and where it actually went.
So here's the bottom line. These financial statements, they're not just about math. As Dr. Wayne Label famously said, accounting is the language of business. Once you learn to speak that language, you can read the story a company is telling you, and, more importantly, you can figure out if that story is fact or pure fiction.
And here you go. This is what that language looks like out in the wild. These are the real deal, the primary evidence for any investigator. This is the paper trail where a detective digs for clues, for inconsistencies, for any red flags that might point to a much deeper mystery.
Okay, so our detective has the main pieces of evidence, those financial statements. But how do they connect one specific suspicious transaction all the way back to those final numbers? Well, they follow the audit trail.
An audit trail is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is a path that you can follow. It's like a trail of breadcrumbs. It's this step-by-step, chronological record that lets an investigator take any number on a final report and trace it all the way back to where it came from. And this is how that trail gets made. It all starts with one simple transaction, right? A sale is made, a bill gets paid. That creates a source document, like an invoice or a receipt. Then, that gets recorded in the company's books. And just like that, every single financial move leaves a footprint, creating this perfect, traceable path for our detective to follow, either forwards or backwards.
Now, this is a really, really important distinction to understand. A regular auditor, they follow that trail just to make sure the final reports are, generally accurate. They're not specifically looking for fraud.
But a forensic accountant? They're a specialist. They're brought in on a specific mission to hunt for fraud, to find missing money, to uncover deception. They're not just checking the map, they are hunting for buried treasure, or maybe buried secrets. All right, so this brings us to the actual forensic investigation itself. We're moving past the standard checkups and into the really specialized techniques of financial detective work. A real investigation isn't just chaos and lucky guesses. It is a super structured process, just like you see here. An investigator starts by gathering every piece of information they can. They build a preliminary picture, they cook up some initial theories about what might be going on, and then they figure out what new information they need to prove or disprove those theories. It's this constant cycle of gathering evidence, reevaluating, and digging deeper until they have solid conclusions that are backed by a mountain of data.
So what's in their toolkit? It's this fascinating mix of high-tech and old-school gumshoe work. They're using data mining software to find that one phony invoice hidden among millions of legit ones. But they're also doing classic detective work, poring over paper documents and interviewing employees to see whose story doesn't quite add up. They use powerful link analysis software to map out these hidden relationships between people and shell companies. And sometimes they just go look to physically make sure that the millions of dollars in inventory the company claims to have actually exists.
And the results of this kind of work, they can be absolutely explosive. These financial detectives can expose these really elaborate schemes, like employees creating fake vendors just to pay themselves. They can find assets someone is trying to hide in a messy divorce or a bankruptcy. And very often they uncover major tax fraud. This is seriously high-stakes stuff.
So you might be thinking, okay, this is a cool story about crime and detection, but why does all of this really matter in the big picture? Well, it's because these financial trails, they are the absolute bedrock of trust in our economy.
Think back to those massive scandals like Enron and WorldCom that just completely rocked the financial world. It became terrifyingly clear that some huge companies were masters at faking their stories. So in response, the US government passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which dramatically jacked up the penalties for destroying, altering, or just plain making up financial records to fool shareholders. It was a huge signal of just how vital this detective work really is.
So, in the end, forensic accounting isn't just about catching a few bad guys. It's about protecting the integrity of the whole system, right? When you invest your savings, or apply for a loan, or even just show up to work every day, you're operating on the belief that the financial information being presented is true. These financial detectives help make sure that it is. They maintain the trust that we all really depend on.
And that kind of brings it all back home, doesn't it? It's not just giant corporations that leave a financial trail. Every single one of us does. Our bank statements, our credit card bills, our tax returns, they all leave this incredibly detailed record. They tell a story about our choices, our priorities, and our lives. So take a second and think, what story does your trail tell?